Hello, my name is Vsevolod Leonov. I am a developer evangelist. I live in Embarcadero. I work in Russia. You can call me just Seva. Some of my US friends pronounce my nick as Server, and that's okay with me. I'm a fanatic of FireMonkey, from styling to 3D, but this new platform for business applications is well completed by DataSnap as a platform for multi-tier solutions. The problem of migration from client-server to DataSnap multi-tier contains two main aspects: what for and how to. These advantages of multi-tier over client-server can be called non-functional, as our users don't care about what is the architecture. Animation, styling, more platforms are easy to see and feel. Flexibility, interoperability, time saves in large projects. It is hidden from the users. When planning the project, these hidden capabilities should be explained to the customer. And what we do in this area is for us to make our life easier and happier. FireMonkey gives us an extremely powerful tool for multi-platform, and this provides the ultimate power, especially in the tasks of building up thin clients. But even before the FireMonkey, developers used multi-tier approach, and many real-life examples prove this concept. Now we have two basic ways of data snapping: object-based and table-based, as I call them for simplicity. This should be kept in mind either when starting a new project or when rebuilding existing client-server application. Before my start for Embarcadero in my early days of being a Delphi trainer and last years already with Embarcadero, I talked with the authors of big multi-tier Delphi and not only Delphi solutions. People really feel better when using advanced technologies. Even in early days of DataSnap, called Midas, they started multi-tier. The results came not immediately. When far-seeing developers continue making their unique system in the same life cycle, the other guys have already done 2 or 3 full resets for the last 5 years. Here you can see a very rough evolution map for DataSnap. We have said farewell to calm in Delphi 2009, and it was really great. Does anyone remember what nightmare was to work with dcom-config 32? Modern DataSnap is now called a platform because it has the full set of capabilities. The main is, for me, transparent interaction between thin client and application server. At the level of record set, you need only to use some more components in chain from query to grid. At the level of object-oriented technology, you can easily send and receive t-object when calling remote methods. The technological landscape is also various, from console binary for application server to service deployment. Orange rectangle means that last year DataSnap was a bit in the shadow of FireMonkey, but multi-platform development opens the new horizons for multi-platform thin clients against one platform application server. Multi-tier brings more capabilities for developers, but they continue keeping the client-server architecture. They say, "We know SQL, and that's great. We like and can think of a functionality in terms of tables. We follow model-driven development, while the models are relational." But to tell the truth, it's nothing in comparison with very simple client-server technology of doing projects in Delphi. But let's think of a new multi-platform world and how our applications are going to live in it. Can we always package our applications together with the platform-specific client libraries? Isn't it more technological to make single platform-oriented or native binaries or executables with more easy, transparent and universal transport taken from DataSnap platform and based on the industrial standards? Yes, multi-platform is not the biggest worry even for thick clients. If you are doing a FireMonkey project with Interbase, you can be multi-platform now and already, as I do. I made a client-server application on Windows with Interbase on Windows. Then I rebuilt the application for Mac, installed Interbase on Mac, and now my Mac executable can work with Interbase on Mac and Interbase on Windows. Nothing special even for blogging, but enough for making multi-platform money. When we are talking about client-server, we can generally distinguish two polar points. First and typical is working with SQL when our Delphi project directly sends SQL queries to the server. Queried text can contain parameters or be concatenated from pieces. More disciplined approach is when no tables, no views, and nothing more is available from the server. We expose only stored procedures outwards, and no other database objects could be accessed. Record sets remain to be the only data structures for information exchange, but all calls are purely procedural. I call this Relational Model API, and sometimes this is a corporate standard for solution architecture. I believe you follow some intermediate way. But this approach has natural-born problems caused by wrong genes, transparent but unclear transport, no ways to communicate with other services, for example, to consume non-relational sources of data. Business logic should be on the server, but the DBMS server can't support fast and ergonomics of UI even by callback or server events, and many others. With the help of multi-tier, we can introduce a business level. It's not only technology like multi-platform thin client. It's like thinking purely of business model regardless of UI and the storage model. Excuse me, I'm treating ER model as a storage. No contradictions. If you are so crazy about ER and our ER studio, you can do your things your way. No offense. When I am saying crazy, I mean you consider ER models as a key for the success in building solutions, and this is preconditioned by the specifics of your domain. In this case, you can either leave business level to the application developers or add one more degree of freedom of imposing more business rules with the object-oriented tools like Delphi or C++ Builder. So when making technological analysis of the means to build up thin versus thick clients, we can conclude we have more flexibility in programming a thin client. Flexibility means one more tier. Let's see some profits for the developer teams. Once again, we are not talking about the users. Excellent, magnificent, stunning, overwhelming FireMonkey interface with premium styles. That's what they need. Let's go back to the development. Delphi has a subversion integration, but some teams prefer splitting tasks in binaries. They evangelize plugin structure, DLL integration. They permit sharing of the source code, but more rely on the clear boundaries in responsibilities. Regarding DLLs, the key point there is the same architecture, 32 or 64. Now for Delphi, it's not a problem. You can do DLL and host application both ways. If you are a C++ Builder developer, we have good news for you. 64-bit C++ Builder is on the way, And don't miss CodeRage as a separate event for C++ fans. I can also invite Delphi guys. One more competence anyhow increase your price on the market. So we have DBA, always in black clothes and in black mood. Green developer lead, programming application servers. Green means optimism, and UI developers with faces turned to the users. If you want to expand your team and become a lead, follow this way. Of course, it's a joke. Joke is joke, but this is nevertheless a good model to involve young developers. They have a clear task, great energy and desire to satisfy the users. We mature hardcoders, of course, are concentrated on more abstract tasks, up to writing only class interfaces. Even if some thin clients should be fully reset, it will cause no harm to the main part of the codebase. Some tasks imply two types of interfaces, for example, for a content manager and for operational manager. This type of splitting is effective. And one more. Now we have a Windows 8 with different UI concept. With Metropolis UI, you can do thin client from scratch or convert the existing project. The process is irreversible, so you will have to have two clients. Minimize your risks of change. Isolate business level from UI. You will have Windows 8 thin client and a regular Windows client. Responsibilities can be split not only in binaries, but in methods. A good way not to interfere when making UI. The same UI. It's the material for Delphi XE. Later I'll provide you with the links. But you, green grade guy, plan and implement some methods in server class, and your younger guys and girls will automatically get proxy classes. Right button, generate proxy class with methods of the same signature. Piece of cake comparing to the use of com type library if you want to consume it from a binary. Of course, unit testing is not a substitute for integral testing. However, early day testing will help you to localize bugs and save your image as a bold developer. But now you can also add one more clear role who will test server methods. If you have a plain Delphi project with data and controls in the same unit and all the functionality in the events, how can you distinguish methods to test? When I was a part of a team to develop a CAD system in the 90s, our scientific and programmatic lead voluntarily prevented us from building a monolithic system. He decided to make the interface with Delphi and the core with pure C++, communicating via OLE2 automation. I wish I had DataSnap these days, rather than trying to debug dispatch interfaces and thinking of marshalling. Transmission of plain objects is not a problem in DataSnap, so no voluntary methods anymore. Democracy won. Some developers feel wary of macOS and future multi-platform IT infrastructure. With DataSnap, we can do this in FireMonkey way. The same codebase, native or original UI with styles. Deployment Manager in Delphi IDE will help you to pack what you need for Mac executable. A big part of my early projects used SQL Server only because I did a pilot project in Delphi against MS Access. I used MS Access to submit the customer my proposals in the form of semi-ready applications. Then I took SQL Server only because it was extremely easy to migrate. The projects are easy to expand to multi-platform solutions if I can split the thick client proper way. Corporate mobility is a hot topic. I didn't feel happy when one of my projects was asked to be remade in C# for Windows Mobile 6. Fortunately, the core algorithm was based on Swiss ephemerides, but UI was re-innovated. If I was asked to remake the business logic of insurance policy price calculator, I hope you know what I mean, I would be really unhappy. DataSnap since XE provides mobile connectors. When are they useful and how we use them? If you only need to make a simple, no business logic application, they are for you. I had a trip around mobile connectors. This summer we had a cross-platform conference in Moscow, and the key speakers were David I and Bruno Ferencz. We also invited Microsoft guys for MS SQL Server session and Windows Phone stuff. I did a conference agenda lookup Phone 7 mobile client. It was fun, of course, not so impressive as my first macOS application a year ago, but a little big miracle too. The advice is, make your application server and Delphi client first, then generate proxy classes in a separate folder. Then you can use the folder in your C# Vsevolod project. The wizard works quite clear and you can easily find your necessary folder for your mobile project. I used C# proxy classes for DataSnap Delphi server. Most of the classes generated did transport things. The only file contains stubs for exposed methods. The code structure in Silverlight really puzzled me, differed from my Windows Mobile 6 experience. I asked available Microsoft colleagues to explain. They answered, yes, we admit spaghetti manner of coding. Be careful. Now I don't care of Phone 7 or 8 or 920 anymore, but the quintessence of my mobile dreams is to keep Delphi way of coding and Delphi IDE for mobile development. We have already seen Mobile Studio preview, so the only things to do is to wait in active manner. And I am looking forward to read Anders' posts about Mobile Studio when available. Enough with DataSnap capabilities, which are really powerful, especially for those who remember old DataSnap before Delphi 2009. Let's consider the real-life example. 12 years ago, a medium business company had two systems. The first system supported the production. Second one was designed to manage customer relationship. The business model was unique. There were some competitors on the market, but the business was very effective due to the quality of the production, heavily or even mainly based on ERP system. CRM system was also unique, so both systems were built in-house. So we have two teams of developers. The teams were isolated as well as their databases. Luckily, they used the same DBMS, but in 90% of cases, DBMS platforms and enterprises differ. The side effect of primary isolation of two systems in the same company is that in future they will touch each other. They will touch each other, cross each other, and they will feel the necessity to use each other's data. At the very beginning, the solutions were typical client-server systems. They sent SQL queries to their databases and received results in the form of record sets. The problem happened long before the management sent a request to support the financial analysis. As usual, when expanding, a company doesn't pay attention to the overall analysis. When the market doesn't allow to grow further, the management starts executing some processes to improve the business model on the base of data in the basis. The less important but annoying problem was caused by the existence of two tables named project in each database. Of course, the problem was not different table names, and it was impossible to automatically synchronize the data in the tables. And the problem was not to gather both teams around one table and once agree to use similar tables and similar data structures. And we all know the more conceptually correct solution. Sometimes it's possible to have the only database for the enterprise, while all the systems store the data in unified tables and use enterprise data dictionaries. Embarcadero, by the way, provides an excellent solution, ER-Studio. In the ideal case, ER-Studio Enterprise is great as supports centralized repository. But the first step can be Delphi in Architect Edition with ER-Studio Data Architect to start ER modeling. Of course, we need to introduce the role Data Architect, and the focus in building up the one big unified system will be set on modeling. In our case, the question of joining the databases is far in the future. The business model is still very agile, so the development of databases and applications are double agile. The life cycle of the systems is not short enough to remake the systems. The life cycle of the system is not long enough to remake the systems. You know the case when everybody waits for more convenient time for changing. But to tell the truth, the two systems and two databases should only allow to match one project to another in different tables. It's a real life, not ideal example. Sometimes a customer manager enters a new project in CRM and forgets to do this in ERP system. Sometimes vice versa. Sometimes the customer manager changes the status of the project, violating business rules in ERP database. You can notice I'd rather talk about problems in ERP database. A friend of mine was in ERP development team. There were a lot of discussions and requests to allow applications to write in the different databases. The final decision was made by the DBA. He said, "Guys, I won't allow your teams to change data in different bases. Find the different way within your current responsibilities." And if the DBMS platforms differ, Embarcadero can propose DB Artisan. DB Artisan allows to work with databases on different platforms from the single window. I can't say the problem of two tables for the same project, but from different positions, was the main point to change the architectures of two systems. The situation with interaction between ERP and CRM was successfully resolved after both teams had left client-server architecture and moved to 3-tier. The databases are not accessed by thin clients. They call only server methods. In both systems, the addition and modification of the project can only be executed by calling the corresponding server method. So there is no difference what thin client calls the method addNew, for example, and some specific SQL for adding is used for particular database. Once again, the database doesn't fail who changes the data. And modern DataSnap can help you in authorizing clients and granting permissions. The tables for entities projects keep their own unique structures in both databases and can be changed with no or at least predictable consequences. If you change your databases frequently and in agile manner, Remember, Embarcadero's DB Change Manager is your helper. So the question is, migrate? Yes or no? OK or cancel? Help? Any migration from VCL to FireMonkey, from Windows 7 to Windows 8, from PC to Mac, any migration should be first assessed from the viewpoint of comfort and time. If we say no thank you, we should first understand what we refuse from. Let's take a test drive. The first step to migrate is to get skills. I did take Pavel's labs, at least the first 5. It's a good trip, especially if you are experienced in older DataSnap. You'll be pleased, and as any other kinesthetics, you'll understand the essence only by executing the labs. Do it. Number 2. White paper by Bob Sword. This is a bit early source of information, so some wizards now look a bit different, but the explanations are superb. So basically we have 2 general approaches. I call them procedural and relational. First, you add some methods to the server method class. Second, you generate client proxy class with the same signatures of methods. Third, you can call the methods on the client side, but they will be executed on the server. Remember, you can easily pass objects via parameters by reference. Relational means you work with tables or record set based components. The full set of apply updates and reconcile error classical methods. The best variant is to start from scratch and use either procedural or relational way of working with the database. Of course, you can mix these approaches. Whether you plan first jump or creep, it's wise to take some pilot and find your way. Let's start from the simple project consisting of 3 forms, to tell the truth 1 main form, second form and a data model. On the first form, on the main form, you can see the action list and buttons. Action list contains the only action. The data module is just a regular data module with the connection components, the data source to expose the data to the DB grid, the data set with a trivial and clear SQL command, and the stored procedure for updating the table with the set of parameters, and the parameters match the number and type of the fields in the table. The second form is necessary to expose the data from the active record to the user and take the modified data. The event handler code is also simple. First, we charge the secondary form to show the data to edit. Then we show the form. Then we emulate the business logic on the client side. Then we take parameters from the form and charge the stored procedure, execute and update the record set. The last operation of refreshing, retrieving the updated data from the database, is not a big deal. It's easy to replace the data set with the SQL command with the client data set, getting data from the provider from the server side. But that's the challenge. In this rather comfortable code we see red arrow, event handler, which is a method of a main form, blue arrow, hard-coded dependence on the data from the secondary form, green arrow, data usage to initialize the components in the data module, and then components are used in the main form event handler to start changes. And again, the data reload from the main form. All this means the smooth migration is possible. Now some pieces of advice. You can use client data sets, and you always could, to keep record sets. Please try to isolate methods where you execute procedures or DML queries against the database. Isolation means some method accepting values only via parameters rather than global variables like references to another forms. All the aforementioned modifications can be done as refactoring with very little impact to the functionality. And after that, you'll be ready to jump for the future as multi-platform support by various thin clients with unified application servers or their combinations and multi-tier architecture. If you feel like doing things in more sophisticated way and avoid drudgery, you can copy the data module and use cloning to pass parameters from thin client to application server. I mean clone the ADO stored procedure and don't isolate the event handler. Bind the secondary form component properties to application server data structures in the manner of binding. Dynamically parse the hard-coded expressions and execute them with new RTTI to break dependencies. But this is another story I try to cover in the nearest future. Now it's time for Q&A, and thank you for your time.
And also, I put up on the screen, here it is again, the Embarcadero.com rad-in-action/Delphi-labs. Pavel did this, for XZ, but it's just as valid for XZ 2 and 3. He's got 11 tutorials that take you from the beginning with a simple DataSnap server through passing objects, server methods lifecycle, authentication, transport, REST server, using jQuery mobile, Windows service, passing plain old Delphi objects parameters. Roger, you asked about that, and callbacks. So he's got 11 tutorial lessons with source code, white paper, and video for all of that on the Rad in Action Delphi Labs for DataSnap. So I found that by searching just Pavel Glowacki, that's his name, DataSnap Delphi Labs, and you'll find this page. There was also, Roger mentioned a question about when you're talking to databases, of course, database has a null type for a field or a column, but an empty string, is what comes over. Is there any other ideas you have how to support null coming from the database through DataSnap?
The point is how to map the types from the database to the server objects. If you take the client data set and on the client side and data set provider, you will first transparently see the data from the application server, and all the conversion operations happen. And maybe I haven't understood the question, but if you need to treat or to see to have a data set, it's better not to pass the data sets from the application server to thin client directly. It's easy to use the standard chain of components available from in parallel slabs first, and in classical books like Delphi 6 developer guide by Pacheco and Teixeira, the book, and it's a typical method. So I guess you should try all the available methods, basic, and then take in particular case what should be used: relational taking the data or object-oriented procedural calls of the server methods. And to tell the truth, in many examples, guys took some intermediate approach, procedural, and so they used any means, all the available tools and component base from Delphi to restructure the client server. But yes, and sometimes I want to mention that sometimes guys selected not the 3-tier, but multi-tier approach. For example, they have a database, the application server, and the thin client for operational needs. And if they need to expose the data to the web client, they make another application server, which is the second application server, and is chained as a thin client to the application server, and then compose the thin and make the thin web client. It's a good architecture, both from the viewpoint of business logic and from the viewpoint of security, because web clients don't access the application server available for operational clients. Something like that.
And also, Roger, you could provide a method if you need to check a column or field to see if it's really null in the database versus an empty string, for example, coming over in JSON or some empty type. You could provide an interface method and have it return a Boolean whether a certain field is true or false. If it's null, call that method from your client to your DataSnap server, have it test the database column for true null versus empty, and or null empty string, and return back a Boolean of true if you want to test for null type in a database column.
Oh, thank you, Anderson. You've got the question, me not. But I keep the position. I don't recommend to use the nulls in the database. It's a typical question, because if you have a null value in the database, you can't say is the string empty or the string wasn't input in the database. So maybe for client server you should refuse from using nulls and save your time from type conversion and writing the analytical queries like it is not null. You won't need to use any time not null in your SQL construction.
Yep. And Rick was asking a question, with DataSnap, can I query multiple geographically dispersed databases from one layer and make it look like one database to the client? And well,
yes, to the client.
Right? Go ahead.
Yes, and that's good not for the our user, but for coders, because you can split the responsibilities at the level of the application server. You shouldn't care. You needn't let your user interface developers this specifics. So it's more abstract-C, and any kind of abstraction of layers contributes to the quality of this system.
And I was just going to say, it's your choice. You could have a DataSnap server for each database, or you could have one DataSnap server that works with multiple databases and returns, combined sets of fields. Whatever you want to define as your interface through the DataSnap server, you can do that. If it's the same,
yes, and
but you could also construct a cross-database operation where you would return the columns to a DataSnap client from DataSnap server, and you don't even have to care where the data comes from, right? Or what type of databases it is.
Yes, absolutely. Including sometimes people decided to go to the multi-tier because they need to combine data from relational sources like DBMS relational and non-relational sources. So, and combine and let the user see the tabled data. Nevertheless, the data came from non-relational sources. And in this case of, as Anders said, in the multi-platform DBMS, maybe the only problem, not the problem, the additional task is to treat transaction. Because if you use the one DBMS platform, you can start the transaction for the one database and many databases, or even fire the distributed transaction. If you if you are on MS SQL, for example. In the case of hybrid DBMS platforms, you need to it's easy just to remake a simple transaction mechanism, like maybe two-stage transaction model is quite typical. So you make something, for example, in CRM system, and call it to understand the transaction, that the changes happen. Then you complete, or it's easy. It's quite a simple mechanism, but take care if you're using many DBMS, you should write some kind of your transaction mechanism.
And then Andrew was asking about, can I build web-based applications or iOS Xcode applications that aren't Delphi applications and access DataSnap servers? And what's your advice there, Seva?
Excuse me, web server means using Delphi to deploy the application server.
Sorry, web-based client. You know, it says DataSnap looks good in a Delphi world, but what if you have a Delphi DataSnap server, but you need to access it, for example, from JavaScript in a browser, or from iOS using Xcode, not using mobile connectors? Is there a way for non-Delphi apps to access DataSnap servers?
Okay, I can recommend to replay the Jim Turney sessions for the previous CodeRage. I mean, yes, CodeRage 6, when Jim is discussing the deployment, the types of servers, and second session types of clients for DataSnap, because I don't want to just waste time and to retell the story. Yes, and I guess we have some in our demos for HTML5 builder. We have an example for web-based thin client against the DataSnap server written in Delphi. If I'm right, yes.
Yep, and also,
yes.
I'll just say that you can, as long as you, whatever client application you're building, browser, whatever, as long as you can make and receive HTTP REST calls, and you have a JSON parser, then you can handle calls and returns. If you want to do all that work yourself using some other programming language like Python or whatever, just pure JavaScript. The mobile connectors we have for C#, Objective-C, Java, and so on make it very easy to take the generated code from your DataSnap server, copy it over to whatever development environment or language you're using for those platforms. But as long as you have a REST DataSnap server or TCP server that's built in Delphi or C++ Builder, it's just sending over JSON packets, right? And so you can build whatever client you want that knows how to parse the JSON, and you can pull apart and marshal and send things back and forth. So it's totally open in that respect using Internet protocols and JSON. So if you need to build other types of clients, we have examples that show you how to build the mobile connectors. We have examples to show you how to use a browser to talk to a DataSnap server. So you have all those possibilities.
Yes, and I can confirm that even in C# and on the platform of Silverlight, I've got the mobile connector excellent, and I compiled with no problem. And the only tip is first to make all the functionality of your application server, and then generate the client proxy. Otherwise, yes, you should understand that if you add some method to the application server, you should regenerate the mobile connectors anytime. So the only tip.
And then Cyprian was saying, while I'm very fond of service-oriented architectures, I have to confess that DataSnap is far from it due to its SQL-centric architecture. And he says, can you comment on this? And I'm replying saying, well, it's not specifically tied to SQL. It is built on top of the DB Express architecture. You can have a DataSnap server that just has a method that you can call through TCP, HTTP, HTTPS, and it then returns value in a JSON packet. So while we build in things like the DataSnap dataset provider and the provider resolver for people doing SQL database operations with their DataSnap clients and servers. You can ultimately just have a DataSnap server that's a bunch of methods that you call through the protocols of the internet, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. How exactly do you manage your objects on client side, remoting them in a Windows environment? Again, I sent the link to Pavel's DataSnap tutorial that shows you how to deal with objects, and there's examples for using and passing objects and marshaling them and so on. That's all available.
Yes, and I can say that Pavel has 5 essential for me labs, because I haven't tried the jQuery, but 5 labs. Each lab takes you 15 minutes long. So in one day, and maybe in your lunch during your lunch, you can play, and it's very easy, and you'll understand first the difference between the old DataSnap before Delphi 7 DataSnap and nowadays DataSnap, because it's a really platform. And please remember that you can test if you are making an application server, you are making some method. You can test the methods without building up a client. It's also very interesting capability, and at the first stage of getting known with DataSnap, it's really fun to make a method and to play with it without composing a client.
Yep. And let's see. What do you suggest people use to support transactions and transaction isolation in DataSnap servers?
I know specific examples. When people were enabled to go without transaction, as Anders said, they use the direct calling of the SQL operation from the server. You can do this. You can do this universally. For example, you add a method to your application server called process SQL or maybe push SQL. So you can compose the full set of SQL commands starting with begin tran and ending with commit tran or maybe rollback, or maybe you can use begin tran or or commit tran from your connection component, and transparently pass the SQL commands from the thin client transparently through the application server directly to the database. So you can do this, but it's not rather technological, because you break you're breaking the ideology of multi-tier. But you can it's one server's method to add to the application server, execute SQL. So you can do anything you want, as Anders said 5 minutes ago. But you can also compose your own mechanisms from the application servers if you are using the several platforms. And some two-stage transaction, you can just find not the algorithm, it's just like a flowchart diagram how to execute a two-stage transaction. Because if you are changing two tables even in the one database, the mechanism is just the same. So changes in the first table, confirming, checkpoint, second table, checkpoint, everything is done. So committing, it's not very difficult to remake the transaction mechanism. Of course, simple one, without some logging or maybe snapshotting the database structures. But it's possible, and it's possible. So the two ways. First, continue managing transaction with the transferring, sending from the client to the server all the SQL construction. And the second way is second way is to avoid transaction, to try to avoid transaction. And the third way is just to write some transaction engine in your application server. It's not very difficult.
And people are always asking questions about capacity, scalability, and I always respond that it really depends on your server operating system, how many connections it can support. I mean, ultimately, it's TCP, HTTP, HTTPS. You've got these life cycles for your DataSnap server classes. How many connections can come in? I think there's a maximum, maybe on Windows Server, for example, of how many simultaneous connections can happen through TCP/IP and HTTP and so on. So, how much memory, things of that kind. And Roberto's talking about he did some tests, and Roberto, if you found some things, send us the examples of your tests. You can upload them to Quality Central or send them to me. I'll pass them along to R&D. We run them here in our tests. But the scale based on what your application is doing, what your operating system and the hardware and database servers can support ultimately. And you can always go ahead.
Yes, and please remember that multi-tier also provides you with capability for balance loading. And please go to the Adriano Lanussi blog. He described the load balancing in DataSnap, and in his white paper, Reasons to Migrate from Delphi 7 to Delphi XE, there is a chapter describing how to balance the loading using the HTTP tunneling mechanism. In this case, you will have to have two application servers and make load balancing. So it's also very good advantage over the classical client server.